America freed the slaves in 1863 through the Emancipation Proclamation of Abraham Lincoln, but gave the slaves no land or nothing in reality, and as a matter of fact, to get started on. At the same time, America was giving away millions of acres of land in the West and the Midwest, which meant that there was a willingness to give the white peasants from Europe an economic base. And yet it refused to give its black peasants from Africa, who came here involuntarily in chains and had worked free for 244 years, any kind of economic base. And so emancipation for the Negro was really freedom to hunger. It was freedom to the winds and rains of heaven. It was freedom without food to eat or land to cultivate, and therefore it was freedom and famine at the same time. And when white Americans tell the Negro to lift himself by his own bootstraps, they don't look over the legacy of slavery and segregation. I believe.
What's up, family? I'm Kelvin Allen, and welcome to the KultureKure Podcast. The KultureKure Podcast is the podcast that features the people and topics that have the power to take you from the ordinary to the extraordinary. So hit that like, share, and subscribe button, and let's jump right into it. Did you know Frederick McKinley Jones is responsible for the development of refrigeration equipment, receiving over 40 patents for it? In the 1930s, Jones began inventing automatic refrigerated air cooling units for trucks, trains, ships, and planes, which helped with the preservation of food. His creation, the Thermo King, allowed people to eat fresh food year-round. His work also contributed to the preservation of blood and medicine, proving to be particularly useful during World War II. In 1981, McKinley became the first African American to receive the National Medal of Technology. According to a report by the National Association of Realtors, home ownership rates have continually increased during the last decade, from 64.7% in 2011 to 65.5% in 2021. However, black home ownership rates have not kept pace with increases of other racial groups. Also, people of color endure significant buying challenges throughout and after their home purchase. Home ownership gaps between black Americans and any other racial group have grown, especially when compared to white households, representing the largest home ownership gap in 10 years. What's on your mind in regard to the direction our country is going in right now?
Well, I think our country is heading either towards improvement or disaster. The election that we have right now coming up is one between democracy and authoritarianism. And it should not have ever gotten to that point in the first place, but we have a Congress that is populated with old people, and I'm an old person, I'm 79 years old, because people are generally becoming more and more lazy. They do not research the candidates, they do not research the issues, and they just vote for whoever the incumbent is in general. You know, once in a while there's an upset, but generally that's where it is. We should have term limits. We should have term limits in the Supreme Court. You know, we should have term limits in Congress and the Senate, you know, and the presidency, which should be one term. It should be one term, and it should be maybe 6 years, and can just do what the person is put in there to do. And that is to serve the people, to make life better, to make businesses better, to make education better, you know, to improve health care, you know, improve access to, you know, affordable medication, all these things.
At the end of the day, I think the pressure that kids have today is far greater than what we had to deal with before. And that's the peer pressure, the social pressure, all the different social mediums. It's unbelievable. So you have to be able to identify with who you are and feel good about who you are. The world is moving so fast today, it's tough for kids to have that time out to do that.
I think back to my upbringing and I look at how kids are brought up today.
And it's just different. And I'm not comparing it from the standpoint of saying one is right and one is wrong. I think the accountability that we instilled upon our youngsters of yesterday was tremendous. Tremendous, because we could not afford to have the bad example. And the commitment by the parents or the parenting figures was so significant. Whereas today, that's unheard of. As a matter of fact, if you have a potential figure or parenting figure that tries to instill accountability to a child that's not theirs, they'll end up fighting the child's mother, because the mother will be saying, or the father will be saying, you're not his mother or father.
Yeah.
So that's a big loss, particularly when you're talking about the African American culture. There's no more of those the grandmas on the street. I was looking at something, and I think it was something I was looking at, a video or something, and the guy was talking about he was walking down the street. He says, where are the aunties and grandmas that used to sit on the porch?
Right.
And you should say, I saw your son down there doing that thing, and they shouldn't have been doing that. And so I went out down there and I hit him upside his head and said, don't you do that, I'm going to tell your mama. And then you got two whoopings. You got the whooping from the grandma auntie on the street, and then you got one when you got home after the grandma auntie told the mama.
Right.
That don't happen today. It's a different world. And I don't know what it's going to take, to replace that. Surely the same thing cannot replace it, because the grandmas and aunties are now inside the house scared to come outside, because they'll be shot by the very culture they're trying to protect, or they used to historically protect.
The mid-'60s in America, when you think about the government, what I think about is the FBI, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, and its director, J. Edgar Hoover. And particularly when we're talking about black nationalists, or even a moderate civil rights leader like the Dr. Reverend Martin Luther King. The FBI saw Dr. King as a threat. They saw the Supreme Court of the United States as a threat. You had Earl Warren, who actually came to the court as a Republican, and then started ruling in ways that Hoover was frightened about. So what the FBI was doing at the time, in my opinion, they were fairly lawless. The Attorney General was not in control of the FBI at that time. There was rampant warrantless buggings of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, of black nationalists, folks in the civil rights movement, and the justification that the Bureau had was that they were communist inspired. And so if they would claim that, then Attorney Generals going back to Bobby Kennedy, everyone thinks of him as a liberal, and with respect to the way they let Hoover do what he wanted to do at that time, he was no liberal. As long as they waved the flag of communism, they would bug, wiretap warrantlessly King, folks in the black nationalist movement, and they were vicious. And so let's broaden the scope, getting back to the Supreme Court. I mean, it got so bad that they used Justice Abe Fortas, a good liberal, friend of the president. They used him as an FBI informant on the court to help J. Edgar Hoover and help the president, LBJ, blame Bobby Kennedy for these warrantless buggings and wiretappings that were about to explode and get Hoover into trouble. So they talked to Abe Fortas. They had a breakfast meeting with him. The third in command, Deke DeLoach, shows up at Fortas's house and says, you may find this unethical. Find it unethical. It was the worst ethical lapse of any justice in the history of the Supreme Court, because he became a snitch. Or in jail, you call them rats. Is he a rat? Is he a snitch? He was an informant. He went into the conference room, and this was 1966, and it's all documented in FBI files and in Fortas's own files at Yale. You have a Supreme Court justice snitching on his brethren, and they were all men, telling the FBI and telling LBJ what the other justices were talking about, and then lobbying them in a case that he disqualified himself. And these cases, they included cases against Cassius Clay, Muhammad Ali, again, warrantless wiretapping, Jimmy Hoffa, the labor leader. They were doing it because they claimed he was mob influenced. So again, if you raise the flag of being in the mob or communism, you can treat people like the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, or anyone else for that matter, including the Supreme Court. They were issuing opinions that Hoover thought were helping the communists and helping criminal defendants. So this lawless FBI at that time was doing incredible damage to the civil rights movement and the black national movement. So it was a really dark time that's more reminiscent of what people think of what happened in the Soviet Union with the KGB, because there wasn't any limits on them. And over time, that changed. Going into the Watergate years, and after Watergate there was investigations, but it was really a dark time. Yeah.
A wise man once said, "It doesn't matter whether you're reading something old or new. What matters is that you're reading." With that being said, I'd like to share with you what I'm reading, or better yet, rereading. The New Jim Crow, Mass Incarceration in the Age of Color Blindness by Michelle Alexander. According to Forbes magazine, Alexander offers a devastating account of a legal system doing its job perfectly well, replacing one caste system, Jim Crow, for another, imprisonment, parole, and detention, that keeps the majority of minorities in a permanent state of disenfranchisement. Alexander looks in detail at what economists usually miss, namely the entire legal structure of the courts, parole, probation, and laws that effectively turn a perpetrator of a crime into a moral outlaw who is unworthy of rehabilitation. Alexander does a fine job of truth-telling, pointing the finger where it rightly should be pointed, at all of us, liberal and conservative, white and black. Well, that's it, family. So I'll leave you with this. Change your thoughts, and you will change your life. Remember, no one can imagine your life better than you can. What you have assumed you are, you will become. The place you are right now was once just an idea in your head. And there's no one to change but yourself. Remember to hit that like, share, and subscribe button. And I'll see you next time.